So, hello, guys, and welcome to the first episode of the People's Podcast.
I'm Marshall. I'm studying commerce at Abbott specifically, and most people would call my views conservative, but there are a few more quirks in it.
Hi, my name is Ahsan. I'm actually studying ALC Media at John Abbott College. Yeah. Let's start this then.
Well, you're not going to let me introduce myself?
Well,
I want to take all the limelight. So, first of all, I have the best views here. I just want to start with that.
Self-proclaimed.
Well, let's be honest here.
Humble.
Very.
So, I studied commerce along with Marshall, and most people would consider my views libertarian or classic liberal kind of. All about the big free market and, just leaving people be generally. So, today's episode that we're going to divulge into is basically we're covering is income inequality and is it bad? Does it have any merit to saying it's bad? And, well, if it is, some possible solutions.
Yep. Even I think we can say without it being bad, we may still have solutions to it because it's not the end of the world, or it may have other things to do with it. So let's just get right into it.
I mean, we're not going to, explain about the topic a bit first. We're not going to say what it is. I mean, Not everybody knows what the topic is.
Yeah, no, let's introduce it.
Sure.
So, what is income inequality, guys?
Basically, more and more today, you see with the rise of many politicians like Bernie Sanders, AOE in the United States. She's been recently a senator, and a lot of the media have been covering this sort of issue, where people are noticing more and more that the income is being distributed less equally, or at least that's what they're saying, among people. And people are worried that all of the income is sort of, and wealth is being concentrated among the top 1%. That's the narrative, at least. And many people have different views on this, on whether or not it's a problem.
Yeah, so it's basically how the income is distributed among the general population. So what we're just trying to tackle is it bad, or does it have any negative effects, or potentially could it be good? So I think we should start off with Ahsan, and what do you kind of see this as? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's good? Or is it kind of nuanced?
Here's the thing. I'm more in the middle between yes or no. I don't believe it's a yes or no question, because in countries, we see countries with high income inequality. Sorry, what? You're looking at me like I'm about the right thing?
No, you're on topic, bro.
Okay, because in countries, coming back to what I was saying before, because in countries with high income inequality, you still have high human development
index.
Well, not necessarily, actually, because what you're doing, first off, is when it comes to that, sorry to cut you off, but when it comes to it is when you're comparing HDI versus the Gini coefficient. So let me give a bit of background to what that actually is. HDI is for human development, basically, and index. So basically the quality of the country, the level of technology, the level of life, and basically compares a place where I'd want to live or a place where I'd not want to live, somewhere with a higher rating. Let's say 0.75 would probably be a high human development index, comparative to a Gini, which is a measure of inequality in a society. So, yeah, sorry.
No, I mean that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you actually, you're going by the stats, by the facts, or statistics and all. That's good. I guess there was a miscommunication because let's just take America for example, right? It has a high income inequality, yet you cannot say that it doesn't have human development habits.
I think the point he was trying to make on this that may have been lost in translation between the bickering, that you can see countries which are very wealthy where I don't think anyone would deny that the quality of life is great there. And they still have a lot of inequality. And even the poorest people are still living good. It's not like, this group is doing good and this class is like the proles from 1984.
Yeah. I think we should all get back to establishing our points, so...
Yeah, sure.
So, you want to go next?
Sure. Basically, I have no problem with inequality on an abstract basis. So if you're just talking about inequality, I don't really have anything wrong with it. So long as people are doing economically good as they can be, and by people I mean the most of society, then I'm fine with it. The only problems which I would run into on this is oftentimes any revolution, pretty much only happens when there's a significant level of inequality. So in order to avoid that, I think yes, that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. But I think a lot of this confusion on this issue is just people not really understanding in economics that people believe it's sort of like a fixed amount of money per year. And in a sense it is, of course, but it's not like if the rich person is getting money, the poor person is losing money.
Explain that a bit more.
I know you didn't say it exactly, but there is no fixed amount of money. Like, productivity is generally going up.
I was just saying, like, if they get 75% of it, the poor people are only getting 25% of it.
Okay.
That's not really how economics works, and that's pretty basic thing.
Yeah.
So long as...
yeah. Are you talking about trickle-down economy? Like, trickle-down...
No. You can not care about inequality and still have different opinions on trickle-down economics or what have you. But just on the base level, I don't think it's anything to be too afraid of.
So, kind of for me is I have the same talking point as Ahsan. That's why I kind of jumped in.
Somewhat.
Where I think that you can clearly make a case that income inequality doesn't necessarily make a society bad based on the Human Development Index compared to the Gini coefficient. So, like I said, we're going to dive into that a bit later necessarily. And then the one reason why I think that it could potentially be seen as bad is actually because of the concentration of power. Because what you see is with countries that have a large portion of their wealth concentrated in a small percentage of their population possess a disproportionate amount of political power. Like we can look in the United States where it's kind of hard to run for any form of office without a huge backing of money. And if you don't have it, you need donors.
Fast.
Exactly. So I think there's the one angle you can look at where it could be potentially bad. But on the other hand, I have a hard time saying that it's ethical to take people's money and make other people put other people on a similar level.
I believe that's another.
I find that violates.
I believe that's a whole other discussion in itself.
Basic morals.
It's basic, yeah, sure. And I mean, let's just have like a. What are your guys' opinions on redistributing money?
First of all, it's shown that it will help to some degree, but I don't think that's the end-all be-all solution. And of course, because the government's getting involved in this, it's not necessarily a clean transfer. It's not like I take $10 from a rich guy and give $10 to a poor person. Money is lost there. So it's inefficient. And there's better ways to do it, I think, to solve this issue than just redistributing things. So, of course, like I said, it's inefficient. The economy is going to be hurt because of it. There's also going to be sort of a moral panic among the people about it. Or not panic, but there will be moral concerns about it. And that's going to cause a whole lot of arguments and things, hurt cohesion.
Yeah.
And I would think the saying, give a man a fish, that's okay. But you teach him to fish, and he'll have fish for the rest of his life, maybe better. So giving people opportunity by college programs or getting a good job or education and things like this, where perhaps one of the things I think we'll be talking about at some point would be military service and everything.
Wait, but we're just backtracking before I bring you off. But so we know for a fact that not a solution. Redistributing wealth is not a solution.
Well, I think it's a poor solution.
I mean, theoretically it is a solution, but at the same time, it's not a solution that I am in favor of.
It's not equality. If you're in a country that believes in equality.
But the thing is, before we even get to it, like potentially we don't need to solve it because it's not an issue. Is what I'm kind of getting at. Because like going back to the comparison between the HDI and the Gini again, I think we should dive into it a bit more now. I was saying income inequality isn't necessarily all bad because like here, let's take an example. So Afghanistan has a relatively low HDI and also a relatively low Gini coefficient. So it's relatively poorly developed and it's also relatively equal because the Gini is low.
Income inequality.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you have an opposite example. Like if you look at the States, they have a high HDI, but they also have high income inequality, right? But then you look at Canada, which has a high HDI, but they only have a medium Gini coefficient. So you can kind of see that it's not something that kind of like holds ground between the countries because you can have one without having the other. So I'm saying that just because the society's uneven and everything isn't fairly distributed, that doesn't mean it's a bad society or a place I wouldn't want to call. Well, I'm not saying to anybody who has a country below HDI, I'm not saying that your country is not somewhere you can't call your home, but preferably I'd like to live in somewhere with a higher HDI. But really what it comes down to is that inequality doesn't really have a strong correlation with it.
Yeah, and on this topic of it not really being an issue, the general conception is the middle class is shrinking, which is a true fact, actually.
Of course.
And that people are going more into the poor section. But I was looking at a Pew Research article, I think it came out fairly recently, where it was showing that more people were joining the upper middle class, and that's one big reason. I think it was something like 14 extra percentage points in the upper middle class. So yes, it's shrinking, but it seems like it's shrinking for some of the right reasons. Of course, that's only one research institute, so it could be wrong, but...
I'm going to cut it. I'm just going to jump in. You can also say that there's not going to... Because the middle class is shrinking, there's not going to be a middle class. It's either you're going to be poor or you're going to be really rich. There's not going to be a middle ground, if that's the case. If there's more people that are becoming richer, like you were saying, there's more people that are going into the upper classes of society, and there's more people that are falling from middle class to poor, then we're going to reach a point in society in places like Canada, which have a moderate income inequality, but I believe they have high HDI.
Yeah.
You're gonna see in Canada people that are just poor and then people that are just rich.
Well, the whole principle is that bad, and what makes that bad necessarily? Because it's coming back to the major topic. Like, I get what you're saying. There's just gonna be poor and rich, but if it's proportioned in a way necessarily, it's not bad on one level, like on the quality of life. Like, even poor people in Canada have a relatively well-off life compared to some other nations, right?
Yeah.
But the area where I can see this could be a problem, and I agree with you here, is on the political side of it, where rich people could have a disproportionate amount of effect on what actually happens. Now, in certain countries, you have limits on donations. Like in Canada, I don't remember the exact amount. What is it, $1,500?
I think it's $15,000 for an individual.
$15,000. Oh, okay, I'm off by a long way.
And it's slightly higher. Well, it's higher for institutions. I think unions can give something like $5,000. I don't really know, but it's not an outrageous sum of money. It's not like the limit is placed at $500,000 or anything. So it's like, not too big a deal.
Like the limit for donations, basically, for the Canadians. But
I can pause.
And that's why, if you look at the democracy index of the world, why Canada is so far ahead as opposed to the United States. Well, I think it's one of the reasons, of course. Being the world leader in everything doesn't help your corruption issue.
Keep in mind, the United States isn't necessarily a democracy; it's a republic. Like, I think a lot of people forget this.
And Canada's a constitutional monarchy.
Okay.
Right. So Canada's federal election finance laws put limits on contributions to political parties and candidates. In addition, donors may give up to $1,500 to leadership contestants for a party.
So it was right originally.
As well up to $1,500 to independent candidates.
Look at that. The guy with the best ideology is right.
And the amount increases by $25 every year. Which is
after repeatedly doing it, you mean? Or
no, I think it's probably just
year.
For each year. So in general, not a lot of you repeatedly do it.
Not for the same person, but in general, the limit.
But limits and caps like that could potentially solve an issue like that could rise from income inequality. Or something that I was listening about was that potentially instead of having necessarily a cap like that, every individual has a fixed amount of money that they get back from their taxes, but they decide what political party they want to send it towards. So that way, candidates aren't relying on donations or trying to pander to richer people, because all of their funding could potentially come from tax breaks to people. So like, they have a certain amount of money, they get back on their taxes, you say what party you put it towards. So people have the freedom to choose what party they want to send it to, send it to necessarily. But one thing that I do have a problem with that is, like, I don't think that eliminating donations in its entirety is a good idea, because people should still have that freedom.
Yeah, they should be able to speak a little bit with their money.
Exactly, but I'm saying if people have a fear that the concentration of power will arise, then there is a way that you could potentially fix it or amend it. You know what I mean? There you go.
I've seen it tossed around that governments just fund it, so it's based on the amount of people you have in your party. I'm not a huge fan of it either, but I've definitely seen that.
But what I'm saying, that's why I'm saying the tax break idea is a lot better. Like, you get a certain amount of money and you send it towards a party and you keep the donations. Like, the government funding the party based on representation is kind of
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I definitely like your
that's
idea
kind
better,
of
to be
like
honest.
kind of like a dictatorship almost, if you think about it.
Fund it all to one
Dictatorship,
party.
It's like Kim Jong Un. He's gonna place someone up as power, and then that person's gonna resign and put him back into power.
Kim Jong
in
Un
a
would
show
never do
of
that.
the-
Okay.
in a show of like some fake
Alright.
democracy.
let's try to get back on
That's
topic.
the off
Let's
point.
get on track. Let's get on.
Let me go back to what we were saying before too, because I just found out even
Yeah.
more facts. Well,
Yeah.
authorized campaign committees may give 2,000.
Okay.
PAC multi-candidate may give 5,000.
Okay. But it's the principle that
Yeah.
you can't really buy a
Yeah.
government with
Yeah,
this much.
These-
So like
this is not government
exactly.
buying.
So like that's why like Canada, for example, I think income inequality, if it were ever to worsen, would be less potentially negative than a place in the United States where there's not enough quote unquote barriers.
But we also have to consider that there could be underhanded contributions.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah,
like
but-
vacations.
it's just
and
you
stuff
have to
like
you have to
Vacation.
work a lot harder to bribe
Yeah.
the government,
So,
which
like,
is what we're all aiming for.
that. What I'm saying is
Well, it's not
like a
only
way,
the government, people in power,
Yeah.
people with
But-
power, right?
yeah, exactly. But this a way like this, it kind of makes it harder for income inequality to be like a rising problem necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I believe income inequality is gonna happen.
Well, it's already happening.
It's already happening.
And-
so
I mean, it's been
on the
happening for
rise.
history, but
Just
it's on
talking,
the
you
rise.
guys
On the
were
rise.
talking about how the upper middle class is growing, and so is the lower class, and the middle class is just losing things. Looking forward, this seems to be how it's going to be. There's not a lot of jobs for people with low IQs or
Low skills.
Yeah,
well,
those-
I mean,
It's more
Well, no,
low
it's
skilled than low.
there's a certain point where you have a low enough IQ that you won't be able to go to the college course to get the jobs that are available, and there won't be anything for them. And for the most part, IQ is hereditary. I think the best I've seen is it's 75% hereditary, and there are studies showing like 80, 90% hereditary. So, intergenerational
What are these studies?
like pretty. This is
But
like.
where are these studies from? Because
Well, I don't have them.
that's
on
a
the
pretty
table. I didn't
large
print them
claim,
out.
quite frankly. You're saying
Well,
I
would.
kind of,
if anyone wants to know about the validity of these
Okay.
studies, they can just look it up online. And it's subtle
seems
science.
like a
You can
stretch.
literally just look up
Well,
is
no,
IQ
but
inheritable?
But the
Yes
thing
or
is-
no?
Well,
IQ to a certain extent is I don't have the studies to back that up, but I do have the studies for certain other characteristics like your height. You have a quote unquote area where you can
it's a range.
end up. It's a range.
Yes.
So like I learned about this in my intro to anthropology class,
a good
and
class.
essentially I love the class. So interesting, honestly. There's nothing better than learning, especially
Homo
things that are.
erectus, right?
There's nothing better than that.
Better than learning that.
But so it's a range basically. Like for your height, basically you fall between a fixed amount. Let's say I don't know, 5'8" to 6'2", right? And certain factors throughout your life will affect this: how much you sleep, how much you eat, how much if your parents love you or not.
Well, yeah.
I'm not even.
Well,
joking
that's
about
actually
that.
true. If
So,
kids are neglected, they're gonna have to go
IQ maybe hereditary, but there's still a range. It's not like a snail at. It's not like
Well,
a,
I didn't say. You will notice if you go back.
Yeah,
and
but
say-
you're saying like you're saying
75%.
this is the be all end all for
let's be
people to
civil.
get. Huh? But you're saying this is the be all
Well,
end all for.
75%. It's 25% is pretty significant.
But what I'm saying is for this number, I would like some like actual factual data to back it up
literally,
because it's a large.
I
claim.
don't think you'll find a study saying anything else. I've looked it up, and I remember I did like 4 or 5 studies, and you
But
can
what
also.
are these studies?
What are you looking for? The names? You can just look up IQ study online. It'll have this. It'll show
You
this.
can do that later. It doesn't matter.
And anyway, something interesting about this is yes, IQ does grow over time. So for example, if you're taking advantage of that 25%,
Okay, so then there may not be a reason at all to worry about quote unquote poor people because people are just getting smarter over time.
yeah,
so
but there's
more
going
and
to
more
be a
people
gap
find
of
them.
time where there are people, and there's like I think about 25%. This is not a study, but this is like a spitball number. I have about 25%. Sure. There's about a 25%.
Yeah, as you were saying.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
about
what about
25% of this people in society who have like IQs around 90 or 80. And like this is Canadian society. This is in the middle of Africa or something.
All right.
Okay. Anyway,
Wait,
so
wait, I just
and
wanna
these
go back-
people.
sorry,
but wait,
sorry.
let me just finish
Okay,
this
yeah,
up.
go.
These people are not going to be able to get things. So we might say a few generations down the line, yes, they're going to be open to it. But right now, it's not really the case. So we're going to have to work on how to take care of these people in the future when they don't have any jobs for them. There's nothing they can do.
Are you talking about like generational income inequality that
Well-
happens from like just a family being poor so they can't afford to pay for school or tuition or something?
No, that's like generational poverty. What we have here is
Right.
that going forward, jobs are going to become more and more high skill. So, and if you need to get these skills from college or trade, but there is a legitimate certain segment of the population who have an 80 to 90 IQ who just aren't going to be able to do that.
So
at least not competently.
I'm just gonna jump in. Are you saying that I'm just gonna speak my mind. Are you saying that people that are rich or have higher IQs?
Yeah. IQ is one of the biggest predictors, even if you come from a low.
Sure, but don't you think that's
income.
kind of like a generalization? You can have.
Well, yeah,
people,
of course, there are going to be people
Yeah.
who are very determined and have this. But at the same time, you're not going to find someone who is ultimately determined with a 70 IQ who's going to be a billionaire. But it's,
Yeah.
like I said, there will be exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, that's how it's going to be.
Usually, I kind of have to agree with you. People that have more wealth obtain that wealth through means that are intelligent. Like they did
Yeah.
something.
They need hard work too, obviously. But
Obviously.
Well,
just
I mean,
persevere.
inheritance is quite a large portion of people are getting their money through inheritance nowadays. So
yeah, that's
More
That's
leading-
generational poverty and wealth,
Yeah, of
generational inheritance, whatever. But I mean,
yeah.
we could talk about that, but that's a whole nother discussion.
My whole point though is just
We
in
need
the
to go
future.
full circle.
Well, no, in the future, there's going to be a group of people who probably won't have any job through no fault of their own. They're born that way. And society is going to have to address how to take care of them and make sure they live a good way.
That's like the
That's
elderly.
The
not
libertarian wants,
necessarily-
he wants to see them in the gutter.
No, I want to see them in the
He's gonna
gutter.
send
But
them to a
hear me out. Just because people always have fears that society is going to have dispossessed people and they won't have jobs. But think about it. The market will cater to the demands, and the market will always supply labor. You just need to find the new source of labor. For example, a lot of people at the corner of the Industrial Revolution or right before it were kind of fearing they would lose their jobs or they would
You just need to train them. That's it.
Well, not even just that,
I'm-
but one of the things is people were going to lose their jobs or they would work less hours. But what actually happened is the number of average hours increased. I had done a paper on this, oddly enough, for a French class. I know it seems like the topics wouldn't intervene, but
Yeah.
they had me doing a
Everything's
paper on
connected, my
quote unquote commerce. They had to do something on your study. Anyways, but the principle really I'm getting to is people decided to orienteer their labor and their work habits towards more market demands, and the average numbers of hours worked went up. Now, this was granted in Europe, not the rest of the world, but the principle was that the market will cater to your demands, so you don't necessarily need to look after all these people, all these dispossessed people, because they potentially won't exist, because we've always had fears that the people get phased out, but it's never happened. We had fears about this, like I said, before the turn of the Industrial Revolution, with the turn of plastics, or with the turn with the alternative sources of energy, like green energy and stuff like that. People were worried that all these coal miners would lose their jobs and stuff, but in reality, more people work in the solar electric industry in the United States than coal miners. So, like, yes, you may lose your individual job, but there's another one out there. The only thing that's stopping you is your own inhibitions to get these jobs.
I mean, sure, you can say your own inhibitions to not getting the job, but there's also the fact that in areas where like big factories would come in and there'd be like coal miners, it was the whole towns were built around a business, and people from everywhere in that town would go to these mines and they would work there to feed their families. And then it's when these places just come up and they run away, or they just jump off and they go to Mexico or something. I mean,
Okay, see you out there, Donald.
Well, yeah, offshore, they just go off, and it leaves all these people unemployed.
But the thing is,
They can't just
but
walk
why
off.
should I prop up a failing city that failed to diversify their economy and put all their bets on one industry? Like, think about this. If your friend is chatting up like this,
No.
is chatting up this one chick, and then look, hear me out.
Diversifying his fleet.
No, I'm saying this as like kind of like a joke, like,
No,
but
yeah.
at the same time, it's got some merit, right?
It's
if
not
you're just
wrong.
talking to
It's
one
not wrong.
person and then everything goes south.
No,
like,
you're gonna be
Well, if
there.
you
in
have
your
all
room
your eggs in
crying.
one basket,
What is-
it's
that's
bigger.
probably a more
That's the better
probably more
comparison.
socially
That is,
acceptable idea.
Yeah.
Yes, you're not gonna find anyone.
No,
who
but
agrees with
my-
it.
my point is-
principle is like, I don't see this as necessarily something that we have to solve. Like, it's
we don't
kind
have
of
to solve it,
your
but
fault.
government needs to have programs in place. I feel for people that lose their jobs because these corporations just run off.
So wait,
Well, no. If I think The reason what I'm talking about here, like the most extreme I would get with like these programs would be like having to care for people and everything, where the government is literally pretty much doing it. I could only imagine myself supporting that if we're living in a future, and they kind of jumped on me for this, very thug-like. But in the future, if this is the case, I'm not saying we do anything now, where people don't have a job because there's no job for them, they simply don't.
But this is what I'm saying. People
can't
were
get the
saying
training,
this forever.
then I would support it.
People have been
Well,
saying this
and if
forever.
it doesn't happen, then it means nothing.
But it never happens because the market will solve these issues.
The market is not necessarily to be trusted on entirely, okay?
Like
Because the same market leaves people unemployed
well,
because corporations don't care.
but should I? But because some people's skills aren't transferable. If you have a shitty education or you have a shitty skill set, it doesn't mean you deserve a job.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Like
there.
of course people are unemployed. People will always be unemployed. So income inequality itself will always persist. And just because people are unemployed, I guess you could potentially say it's unfavorable, but is it bad to society? No. Being unemployed is natural for certain aspects.
Well, yeah, there's always a certain level of unemployment.
Yeah.
But anyway, for more like broadly in the here and now, not in this like hypothetical future. I think I'm getting a little too caught up on that. I'm not really a fan of redistribution. One thing I would be okay with is a negative income tax, kind of stealing from Milton Friedman. If you're not making a certain amount of money, basically he says you're not going to be able to do anything. So there's a certain amount of money when you're doing your taxes, there's a certain amount of money in which you're not taxed on. Like if you're making, let's just say, hypothetically, less than $1,000 or at $1,000, you have 0% tax. This is why, as kids, they can work like small-time jobs and not have to file their taxes or anything. He's suggesting that for however amount you're below that, you get a certain amount of money. So if you're $50 below the $1,000 threshold, you'll get a certain amount of money.
But I mean, that's still theoretically redistributed.
Yeah,
income.
well, it is, of course. But his thing is not based on like inequality is bad. It's just that for people to have opportunity, they need a certain amount of money.
So this ties into basic universal income.
It basically is. I would like pretty much all policies. I'd like to see a test run before I actually approve it. But
there were a few.
It's not too bad of an idea. Well, for universal basic income is a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Because he looked at universal basic income actually, and he pretty much said this is too expensive. We're not going to be able to do it. And this is before it had been tried. But there had been a try in, I believe, Manitoba in Canada, and you try in Ontario in Canada, and I believe there was one in Denmark or some Scandinavian country. And basically, there were good results, yes, but they quickly found that it cost way too much money, or they ran out of all their money really quickly.
The government running out of their money.
So there was a good effect, but it simply wasn't worth the amount of money. There's more efficient ways to do it.
I can understand, but do you or do you not agree that pumping money back into lower class people and making sure that they do get a job, and on top of the universal basic income that they get, would help the economy come back up?
Instead of approaching a universal income or redistributing money in a form of negative income tax, hear me out, guys. So now this is one of the places that I quote unquote would defy libertarian values is I believe in affordable education, not free education. And we'll get into this in a later time. But the principle I'm kind of going at is the fact that if you made education affordable and more people go to school, a few things happen right off the bat. Now, according to the Labor Bureau of the United States, granted this is the United States, so not everywhere, the more years you spend in school, the more money you make. It's a pretty solid correlation. It's not 100%, but it's pretty strong. So think about that for 2 seconds. Right off the bat, that means you're paying more money in taxes. So that's more things to go towards social programs, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, if you make more money, you spend more money, right? I mean, obviously, it's not a perfect curve. The marginal propensity to consume does decrease as the more money you make. I mean, it's basic. It's basic microeconomics.
Sure. If you make more money,
you spend a smaller percentage of it. Not that you spend less money. Your
money falls more into assets then, because if you're so rich, you'd rather have assets to keep that money there. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be spending money.
But you're spending more money. You're spending less of your more money. But so the principle I'm kind
more
of
than an average person.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. So the principle I'm kind of reaching at is if we make education more affordable, if for some reason you want to close the gap on earners, it's not necessarily passing around money. It's creating productivity and more money.
Are we talking about university in Canada?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying
Yeah.
make university more affordable, make trade schools more affordable, because those people
Yeah.
will become more productive people. So if we ever wanted to close this gap, for some reason, I'm not saying we necessarily need to, this way is a way that helps everyone. Because people say, oh, I don't want my money to go towards other people's educations and stuff like that. I'm like, it helps everyone, because these people aren't unemployed. These people aren't living off welfare. These people are becoming functioning. I'm not saying you're not a functioning member of society if you
Yeah.
don't go to school. Keep that
course.
in mind. But I'm saying you're more. You'll
be
the
better
tendency
off.
exactly. The tendencies are, and you'll be better off, as Ahsan said.
I think what he's trying to say too is that you'll get a return on investment in terms of taxes. So let's say you invest a certain amount of money to make sure someone gets educated. That person is more likely to get a high-paying job, and then
Yeah.
he's taxed more, so you're taxed less. Or as overall, we have more money for social programs, and we don't need so much from everyone. We can lower the tax
So
rate.
Exactly.
We're collecting
instead
more
of
money.
instead of providing basic universal income for all these people, just make it so that the population is more educated.
exactly.
So that
Not
they
free.
can-
Not free.
Yeah.
School should never be free. There is value to be placed on it. But
Just give them opportunity,
Yeah.
even if it's a bit costly
Yeah.
for them.
Give them so many opportunities that they have to decide what they want to do.
Another thing on this
2019, right?
talk of opportunity is
First world
helping
problems.
people have small businesses.
oh,
So, for
thank you.
example, one thing I like about Denmark, I don't really like to praise Denmark's economy too often as a conservative, but one thing I really like is that I've looked at it, and Denmark has some of the easiest systems for setting up small businesses, and this is a great way to lift people out of poverty and help the economy overall, because you're creating jobs for other people, you're creating services, and small business owners usually make a lot of money if it works.
Well, the thing is, they help the economy a lot because they employ people,
Yeah.
and it's
So for the government to streamline the process for people and maybe give investments for them, they're already doing this to a certain degree, but I think it'd be a great idea. It's right up there with the education for providing
or,
opportunity.
and coming back to the small business, like this, if we wanted to quote unquote close the gap or increase the amount of earners with income inequality necessarily, like abolishing the small business tax would probably be the best way to take it.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. Now I know a lot of people are gonna say like, oh well, we should always tax corporations, this and that. Because I think like you're gonna create a huge incentive to open up business. And think about right off the bat, if there's no small business tax, they're keeping more money. So what does that mean? You can hire more people. Now some people are like, oh, this is trickle down economics. It's not some big massive corporation. I'm not saying corporations should pay no taxes, but I'm talking about the small like mom and pop shops or like the 20, 30 person stores and stuff like that. If you don't have them getting taxed, they're going to be able to hire a lot more workers because they're would that be their fixed cost or would that be their
For what, the taxes?
Yeah.
Taxes are somewhat fixed, but if you
okay,
get more
well,
money
there's property tax
and
other
you
stuff.
move into
Anyways,
things like
but
that.
you lower
yeah.
their basically their cost of operating, right? So right off there, they have a higher incentive, and this isn't, you're not eliminating their personal tax. You're not eliminating their income tax. You're eliminating the small business tax.
And even on corporations, I've seen, of course, people will have the inclination that they want to tax corporations, and that's a good idea. But we see Ireland and Liechtenstein and all these places. Ireland for a long time was going through a very hard economic time, and they lowered their corporate tax drastically, like it's one of the lowest in the world.
More
And-
corporates came in.
Yeah, and a massive amount of corporations came in, such that they were actually collecting more money from corporate tax, even though they lowered the tax.
Well, that really
So
depends on.
I'm not necessarily saying
But
we
that
do that,
depends
but
on
it's
if
something
the
to look
demand
into.
to set up things is inelastic.
Yeah, but
or
everyone,
inelastic.
every corporation is looking to set up their
Well,
headquarters
no, it depends
in
on the
some place.
country. It depends on the country. Like if because for certain countries it's inelastic. Like if North Korea lowers their corporate business tax, that doesn't
Okay.
mean more corporations
Well,
are going to come
I
on.
don't think
that's
there's
an
a massive
inelastic
difference
demand.
between
It has
Canada
to do with
and
the
Ireland, though.
government, of course.
Yeah, but
the government suit
Yeah.
the corporations'
So that-
desires,
Lowering
agenda.
yeah.
There's that whole aspect you got to consider because corporations are big businesses. They have their own agendas they want to go with. You can't necessarily say that. Well, you were saying that because they have low corporation taxes,
But-
you'll have
yeah.
more corporations coming
Yeah.
in. Sure, but that's Ireland. Like you made a good point.
But I
by
don't think
saying
there's a
that-
massive difference between Ireland and Canada.
I think there's a massive
But
difference,
there is
but
with
you
North
can't apply
Korea.
it to every country.
Well, no,
No,
but
you can't.
Because we're talking about income inequality as a whole. We're not just necessarily.
well, I'm going off
speaking-
topic, so screw you. I'll do
Typ-
what I want.
typical.
I'm a
typical.
libertarian now.
We don't want you. We don't want you.
It's a shot in the dark, but it's nice. We're 37 minutes in. This is looking
This is pretty
good,
solid
yeah.
for a
Yeah.
first episode.
Something I do want to talk about a little bit because we did look some
Yeah.
things up on this is the military service thing.
Right.
Ooh.
Boo. Well,
No, don't hate our military.
We were
I
looking at
don't-
the
I don't
salute
know,
them.
my God.
Basically, there's two ways to look at it. If you're in favor of it, at least, it's either heavily encouraging it or making it compulsory. So, for example, places like, I believe France is making it, or at least it was proposed that it's compulsory again. And many...
It wasn't military service necessarily, it was public service.
But a
So you
main
could
part
be a
of that is
fireman.
military service. So, for example, in Scandinavian countries, they have, a lot of them have the same thing today, actually.
No, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things on this is it would provide more opportunities. The literature on it, or, well, studies, not necessarily literature, is mixed. I saw something on Portuguese. It helped work for them. It raised the wages of especially people who were low income. Because not only does it give you, like, sort of a job to build experience on and a path to go upwards, but it also builds discipline, which is very important for going back to school and starting businesses and being a productive worker.
Well,
So there's all these things. But I don't know if I'd implement it in Canada.
well, the thing is, I'm gonna butt heads with you a lot right here,
Yeah.
because first of all, you're curving people's personal liberties. Like, you're not gonna force me to get a certain job or some certain. Like, I'm not sure about you guys, but like, I like being able to do what I want as long as I'm being productive. Honestly,
I think
but-
everyone does.
Exactly. So like, I understand quote unquote the merit, but another thing is you're kind of not necessarily. Actually, you are kind of operating on a fallacy. Like, it's not necessarily true that wages do go up because,
Well-
in contrast, there was a study done by Vox.eu, CEPR. Not the same
So
horrible
typical
Vox.
of Vox.
It's not the same
Let's
horrible
not,
Vox media. No, it's not. It's not.
let's
It's not
not
that
say
awful.
that.
It's not that awful.
We love you,
awful-
Vox.
No, it's not that awful thing. It's an actual reputable site where economists
Yeah.
debate and kind of like publish articles. And it says that, well, actually, mandatory military service doesn't necessarily increase wages. A lot of people actually end up in horrible situations, or some of them become extremely violent. Like, I think at some point they source some.
If you're right from high school and you go into the military,
Well, not
then
necessarily
maybe-
high school, but it's a principle that mandatory public service doesn't always work. Like, a lot of things we have to understand is countries are very different.
Yeah,
Like,
there's-
there's no blanket statement. It's just like going back to your other thing when you're talking about lowering the corporate tax. Like, what you have to understand is things have to be individualized.
Yeah, I understand that there's no set rule with regard to it, and there's a mixed amount of studies on this. You have one saying it does work. I have
But,
one
but
saying
the principle is,
it,
it's you
well,
can't blanket statement it.
Well, I'm
There's-
not going to blanket statement it, but you're saying, okay, well, we have one saying it does work and one saying it doesn't. I'm not saying, oh, this is definitely the best cut. This is going to solve all the problems. But if we're looking, very few, if any,
Yeah.
legislation is saying, like, oh, this is 100% going to be send us into the golden age or anything. So just saying, just having the proof there, I think, opens it up for an opportunity or further discussion or maybe even legislating it.
What do you
And
think,
I'll
Ahsan?
be the first to admit also that it does help with patriotism and societal cohesion.
I
So
like my
it's
I
a guilty
like the
pleasure.
military, so
Yeah.
I'm for it.
I would
I'm for
also
it.
say that public service is also a great thing.
So-
I think
but-
public
but-
service
but-
does
Yeah,
like
I'm
what
not even-
France is doing.
But what I'm
it's a
coming
good-
at for 2 seconds.
What?
You think you should force people to go take a certain type of job, and if they don't, they face fines, and if they don't pay those fines, they go to jail. So because I don't want to serve the government, but I don't want to be a puppet of
Look,
some fascist
if I don't
regime.
want to pay taxes,
Relax.
you're making me pay taxes, and I'm serving the government because I'm going for anarchist.
But no, but honestly,
No,
Hear me out. Hear me
I
out.
understand
wait,
the
wait.
concern about
no,
liberty.
but think about it, especially in this context. You're curving people's liberties, and you're forcing them to work to solve quote unquote inequality that may not even be a problem. You're forcing people to solve something that might not even be an actual
Well, is it
issue.
forceful?
Well, yes, because if you weren't doing it and they were mandatory, you pay fines.
You can't
or-
say I don't want to go.
Well, no, but that's the point of mandatory military service, because right
Well,
now it's optional.
Yeah, right
and
now
public
it's
service
optional.
is optional.
I mean, you
But-
could technically encourage it heavily, but I don't know that that'd be really that effective, especially in Canada.
I
Yeah,
mean, just
exactly.
make
Which
it
is
so
a pretty
that
peace-loving country.
if people do join this military program or forced military program,
No,
as you
I'm-
say,
You join the forced
If-
military
if
program.
If you do
That's
decide
kind
to
of-
join the forced
let's-
military
let's-
program,
let's-
if you
that's
do,
kind of an
it will look
oxymoron.
better. It will look better on your resume when you go apply
no,
or something.
let's just be clear.
The
I'm
thing-
not
the thing-
necessarily
the study
fully
was
on
going for is
board
that the
with this
wages,
stuff.
even if you have this experience, it doesn't necessarily help you out.
Well, especially if everyone has some sort of
Exactly, because everybody
You
has
can't
it.
say
There's
everyone's
going to be different
experiences
jobs,
are
though.
the same. Yeah.
Like, if, for example, if I'm working as like an infantryman versus I don't know, a janitor.
Yeah, but-
you're gonna say, oh, this guy has more grit.
No, but
Anyway, I'm not necessarily saying that the economics is why I'm on board with it, or that I'm.
This is the whole principle. We're talking about inequality.
It's a
So if
solution.
the economics,
It's
Well,
just
like I said, I'm gonna keep
solution.
going off topic.
but why are we?
Make peace with it? But I'm not even fully on board with it. I'm just saying it's interesting, and I think it holds weight. That there's certainly something to be said. Liberties are like this, but there's more to life than liberty. Liberty is very important. It's incredibly important, and we have a constitution because of it. And I wouldn't change that or anything like that.
You don't have to clarify your stance
But there's
on
also
liberty.
very important.
We know that you believe in liberty.
I
But
mean,
to the
I don't know,
listeners, like-
man. I don't know.
No, but it's
supply management, man.
Listen here. This is
we're
false.
thinking up
Fake
ideas,
news.
right? We're just pretty much thinking up ideas
Yeah.
to a solution of it. Like, it's not necessarily gonna be this one single solution that's gonna
But the
solve
thing is,
all our
yeah.
problems.
When I've been bringing up my solutions, I'm always trying to paraphrase it, and we potentially don't need to solve it. And the thing is,
Oh, yeah,
going
well,
back
I
to
agree.
my education thing is, it's not necessarily to solve it. It also increases productivity. So like that's one of the more reasons.
It's
like
one aspect of many. I
Yeah,
get
we
it,
should probably be clear here because people probably won't see that initially. Is that 2 out of 3 people here don't really believe it's an issue, but there's a lot of devil's
I don't know if
advocate going
anyone-
on here.
But the thing is, like,
Yes, there's a lot of
the
that.
thing is, it's always good to like try to see things from another perspective, quite frankly,
Right,
and be
and we
open
shouldn't-
to learning.
Or alternatively, me trying to shovel in things to solve inequality, which really just for my other agenda of patriotism, nationalism.
All right,
so
last stance.
yeah, I think we should
Last
be
stance.
wrapping it up around here.
Yeah, I
It's
think that
dragging
was
on for the
pretty good
first
wrap up.
episode. So kind of how I see it really is I don't really think it's an issue necessarily on the quality of the country, but the concentration of power, because people controlling more money have a bigger influence in politics, could be an issue. You could try to solve that and put in some policies. But honestly, I don't believe you should be taking away people's money and redistributing it in a way that's not going to make society more productive. So all in all, I don't really believe that income inequality... Actually, it's not that I don't believe income inequality is not a real issue and it's not bad.
Yeah, I agree with the preface that for now, like in the future, we may get worse situation, and if that happens, I'll change my
I don't
attitude.
blame you.
But for now, I don't see it's an issue. I would definitely be open to the small business thing we talked about and the educational thing for now, because I think it holds use beyond just curbing inequality. But for now, I have to agree with Roderyk.
I'd have to say that it is an issue, and it's gonna need to be fought by the people to change this, because
Revolution.
you could say that the government is in the pocket of a lot of rich people. I mean, this is
But that's the
fact.
thing, you put policies in place.
Yeah,
there.
for
Right,
now
you
though,
can
I
put
don't think we
policies
really
Like
see
my
that.
idea
There's
where...
people that would always try to take these policies and shove them out the window because it goes against their own agenda.
Yeah.
Hence, rich people. So there's gonna be a big fight revolution if you would if you say
Yeah.
that revolution, so to speak, of making sure that the middle class rises again.
The middle class.
Middle class
Revolution of the middle class.
Revolution.
The
Proletariat
proletariat
unite!
is now middle class.
All right, guys.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
we thank you guys for tuning in, and next week we'll be back with a spicy topic. If you like what you heard and you want to keep up to date with us, we're on Instagram at The People's Podcast 7. We're on Facebook at The People's Podcast. And we're also on YouTube at The People's Podcast TPP. Love you guys. Peace.